Hello, everyone. So this video lecture, I'm not really sure if this is going to work or not. I really think it's important for us to talk about the Serpents of Paradise, and I absolutely love this essay. So what I want to do is, I asked you to post your STQ squares today. So some of you did, and that's fine. I just needed some of you, because I just wanted to see sort of what was sticking out to you all. So this is going to be awkward, but what I'm going to try to do is basically have a discussion, but with it just being me. So this might be a little bit weird, but I at least want to hit on some of the main points that you brought up and some main points that I want you to take away from this reading, because I think it's very important to understand and appreciate this reading going into working on your argumentative paper. So as I scroll through the discussion posts, one of the overarching themes that I've seen is that you enjoyed, well, maybe not enjoyed, but you thought this was written well. That there was a lot of details and imagery that you thought were interesting or cool or beautiful. And that is something that we definitely need to discuss, is that Abbey he's trying to accomplish a couple things here. He's trying to relate an event or an experience of his in a personal narrative essay type of way. He's also trying to give the reader information. He's also trying to arguably persuade the reader in how they think about nature and wildlife. So there's a lot going on in this. And it's important, a little background information about Edward Abbey. He was very much an environmentalist. He got into some trouble when he was younger. He grew up in the South. He grew up in the American Southwest. He was one of my professors in graduate school was actually a student of his, which was such a cool experience to hear what she had to say about him. Abbey. The phrase to throw a wrench in something or to monkey wrench with something, it's that colloquial slang phrase that hopefully we've all heard, that originated with Abbey. He wrote a novel called The Monkey Wrench Gang that was inspired by his life. And the Monkey Wrench Gang is all about eco-terrorists, sabotaging construction equipment, mining equipment, in the American Southwest to prevent the encroachment of suburbia and civilization into this area that the characters in the book thought was just sort of this beautiful, wild piece of nature. Abbey very much participated in some of this stuff and held these beliefs, and the Monkey Wrench Gang was sort of an exaggeration of his beliefs and his actions. So he got into some trouble for sabotaging construction equipment and mining equipment. In the book, the characters actually end up blowing up a bridge. He didn't go that far. But he was a saboteur and a writer and a teacher. And the phrase to monkey wrench with something or to throw a wrench in something meaning to sabotage something, that originated with Abbey. So Abbey very much loved and appreciated nature. And that's an overarching theme throughout this essay. So we can get a sense of his love and appreciation from nature just with the care and precision, the details, the affection that he writes about it with. So that's a very important part of this. And I think that had a less talented writer tried to tackle this, less talented, less skilled writer tried to tackle this subject, it might not have been as effective, because really this is a very simple story to tell about these snakes and how he observed their behavior and his thoughts about their behavior. It's really something quite simple, but he writes it with such beauty and reverence that it makes it into a much larger experience for the reader. So some of the questions that one of the questions that I think is really important is, how much time does this cover? we don't know necessarily. This is from a book called Desert Solitaire, A Season in the Wilderness. So the book itself, I believe, covers about an entire year of Abbey's life as he worked as a park ranger, living in solitude. So, but with that in mind, we don't know how long the actual events of this essay take place. Does it take place over the whole summer, over a whole year? Is this just a few weeks of the year? We don't know necessarily. The quotes that you pointed out are beautiful quotes. And I've seen that a lot of you have commented that you chose the quotes because you thought they were interesting either in the image, the imagery that it created, or a lot of you picked the quote about being a humanist, that you'd rather kill a man than a snake. So that right here, I prefer not to kill animals. I'm a humanist. I'd rather kill a man than a snake. Really, I think is the backbone of this whole piece. Because earlier in the essay, he tells the rattlesnake that if it comes back here, he'll kill it, and it would be like murder, but where will he sit down his coffee? Some of you also commented on how he used humor in this. But then later, he says, I'm a humanist, I'd rather kill a man than a snake. This does not mean that he wouldn't kill a snake, even though he reveres nature. But what this really shows us is how much disdain Abbey has for humanity and for civilization. He very much loathes what humans have done to the environment. Abbey was actually was it Greenpeace? I think it was Greenpeace. Abbey was actually one of the founding members of Greenpeace. So we get how Abbey feels about nature. And I believe this is very much the backbone of the essay. Yes. Some other points that you brought up, a lot of the points that you brought up had to do with the humanist kill a man over a snake idea. Let me see, what else? Okay. So a lot of your questions, quotes, and talking points had to do with the behavior of the snakes and Abbey's interpretation of it, and also how he was able to use details and imagery and description to create this beautiful, beautiful piece that you found compelling or at least interesting to read. So a couple things that I want to go through. Yes, this is a personal narrative essay. This is about an experience in Abbey's life. This is a chapter from a larger book about a personal experience of his. So it fits under that memoir category that the previous video lecture discussed. So we have a ton of creativity in this, a ton of, a lot of imagery, slowly building thematic elements and conflict. A lot of the stuff that we're going to get into about the elements of craft we see in this. So it is very creative. It reads like a piece of literature. But then it is a true story. It is a personal essay. But then there's a lot of research in this, a lot of evidence that I think is important. So we can, so much of this, at least in the introduction, the first couple pages deals with Abbey's sort of description and reverence for nature. But we know that Abbey is a park ranger and that he's living out here in the desert. But without any further biographical context of me telling you that Abbey's entire body of work has to do with nature. He revered nature. He hated what humanity was doing to it. Without all of that context, there's a lot of information in here that one does not just know. One does not just know the nesting patterns of birds or their migration patterns. So he either observed this, which we know he did, but he possibly researched this more too to fully understand what was happening. So there is a lot of research and evidence used in this. It's just not necessarily presented in the way that we're used to. We get the Latin names for animals. Nobody just knows that. You have to look it up somewhere. So there is evidence used in this. The images that are in this are actually ones that were from the book that Abbey had put into the book. So without going into too much detail, we could study these images and possibly glean more information from the images. Clearly, they are all Native American inspired, so that sort of we could make some assumptions or some guesses, or we could even analyze that further. So we go, as we move through, we just get this whole experience that Abbey has. There's research, there's evidence employed. We get these thematic elements of Abbey sort of developing this relationship with this snake, with the gopher snake, and how he anthropomorphizes the snake. He gives it almost human traits and begins to sort of build a friendship with it. Anthropomorphism is a big part of this essay and how we attribute human characteristics to non-human entities. As we get closer to the end, we get to this moment where the snakes are gliding across the sand to him. On page 289, in like the 25th paragraph, about halfway through, Abbey says, like a living caduceus, they wind and unwind about each other in undulant, graceful, perpetual motion, moving slowly across a dome of sandstone. If we were having this conversation in class, I would ask you what a caduceus is. I don't know if any of you looked it up, but a caduceus is the symbol for medicine with the staff and then the two snakes winding around the staff. It's the symbol for human medicine, but it's also the symbol for veterinary medicine too, which I think is interesting. So he's using humanized descriptors to give these snakes, for us to understand the snake's meaning and behavior, which I think is very interesting. So we end, as we get to the ending, which I think is so important. On page 290, sort of the second to last paragraph, Abbey says, and this is part of the larger theme of anthropomorphism as well. Abbey says, it seems to me possible, even probable, that many of the non-human, undomesticated animals experience emotions unknown to us. What do the coyotes mean when they yodel at the moon? What are the dolphins trying so patiently to tell us? Precisely what did those two enraptured gopher snakes have in mind when they came gliding toward my eyes over the naked sandstone? And here's the whole purpose, theme, just the moment of absolute thesis and clarity. If I had been as capable of trust as I am susceptible to fear, I might have learned something new, or some truth so very old we have all forgotten it. That sentence really is the whole thesis, the main argument, the whole point of this. Abbey takes this sort of inconsequential experience of his experience with these snakes, and he anthropomorphizes it. He gives it so much meaning. He details it to us, the reader, in a graceful, detailed, imaginative, interesting, emotional way. And then he builds all of that up to this one moment where he wants us to stop and think. We have moved so far away from nature that we have forgotten what we can learn from it. I think is what Abbey's really trying to get at here. So not only is there this argument and purpose, but his approach to telling this and to achieving that end is very important. This is a very slow, graceful, carefully unwinding and precise essay. He's forcing us, as we read this, to slow down and appreciate nature. Everything is very calculated that happens in this essay. I'm running out of time here. But I want you to think about that as you go into your narrative essay. How can you sort of unfold your argument, your points, your evidence in a way that even subconsciously leads your reader to manipulate your reader to where you want them to be at the end?